listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to a special pre-Thanksgiving edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. Michael, obviously, a lot of people will be traveling. Hopefully, everyone can get to their destinations safe, happy, and healthy. We can spend the weekend with our loved ones, eat a lot of food, consume a lot of football. But today, Michael, before we get into the football, is a big day in American history. As always, we always recognize November 22nd as the anniversary of the JFK assassination, this year being the 60th anniversary. I know that this is something that you have taken a fascination with as it pertains to the storytelling surrounding the JFK assassination. So as somebody who obviously has a liking to this, I guess, history of this, what's your mindset at? What are you thinking about? And I guess, what have you been reading this morning?
Well, I mean, I read all the time about it. If anybody asks what's my hobby, I would say solving JFK. Not that I'm going to be able to solve it because it's too complicated. It's too complex. My second hobby is harassing Gerald Posner online as he tries to continue to spread this narrative that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. When
you tweeted at him yesterday.
I'm going to keep going. He's probably blocked me by now, nor do I care. Seriously. Listen to some of the facts. I think, to me, 60 years, it's time for somebody to tell the truth. And, it's starting to get into the mainstream media. What's interesting about the case for me has always been, it's kind of been a commentary on the media more than anything. Because this story is what the media chooses to cover and what they don't choose to cover. What narrative they want to promote, and what narrative they don't want to promote. And it all comes down to that. It's not finding the truth. And now we're seeing Rob Reiner and Soledad O'Brien. They have a podcast about it, which is great, right? I mean, Matt Crumpton's done the Solving JFK podcast, which is great. James D'Angino, who is one of the foremost experts on this, right? He's got all the facts. And, he's offered a debate. Posner, of course, he's retreated, like a bad army. He's not going to touch that for a million years because he can't defend it. And I feel bad for, Jim Gadsden's family, who was ridiculed, who was made a fool of, who they just basically said they did everything they could to discredit him when he actually was the only one. He was a great American for trying to uncover the truth. Now, did he have it all? No, but he had us in the right direction. So, to me, it's really a commentary. This whole assassination is a commentary on the lack of balanced media coverage that has extended beyond all the borders that we live in, whether it's political, whether it's the NFL. It's whatever narrative they want to come up with. It extends everywhere. So I was lucky, Femi. You weren't even born yet, but I was only 3 when it happened. And I was 4 when it happened, had just turned 4. And I got involved with it when I was hanging out with a bunch of guys from Temple, and they were showing me the Umbrella Man, about a guy standing in Dealey Plaza with an umbrella up. Now, it rained earlier in the day that day, but his umbrella was up and the sun was out. And that's a little peculiar. And then you start reading about it. And, they always have these different tales that they tell. But they can't really escape it. They just discredit all the witnesses, whether it's Lee Bowers in the railroad tower or Richard Case Nagel, who there's been many books on about how he walked into a bank in El Paso, Texas, and 2 days before the assassination and fired 2 shots to the ceiling so he could get arrested, so that he wouldn't be the patsy in the case. So there's so much of that. And I keep trying to figure out, where will this all unravel? Why hasn't it unraveled yet? Whether it's the gun, whether it's the magic bullet. People think J.D. Tippit was a hero, right? And they think that he was, and his family got funded over millions of dollars because he was allegedly shot by Oswald, and when that's not even true, right? And so, to me, it's just been, and it's ongoing. And I tell my 2 sons, I'm like, look, I know I'll be gone, but somebody come to wherever you put me and just tell me who actually did it. I kind of know who did, but just confirm it. And that's why I find it really hard to believe that people can still cling to Lee Harvey Oswald was on the 6th floor. He fired 3 shots. He ran down the steps. No one saw him. He jumped onto a car. He jumped onto he walked. Then he jumped the bus. Then he walked a mile away from his house. Then he ran to. Then he shot. Then he ran to where he shot Tibbet. Then he ran to the movie theater, and and he's the lone nut, but yet he kept saying he was a patsy. Like at some point, if you just put it up on a whiteboard and said, okay, here's where we are, there's no way you could come up with it. It just shows us how stupid we are, and we'll believe anything.
I mean, yeah, if you say something long enough, it ends up becoming the truth, I guess, is kind of the media's strategy with a lot of this stuff here. But it's interesting because you mentioned that, like, you're like, you don't know when the truth will end eventually be uncovered here with this JFK assassination and everything. Like, do you think that there's still going to be that hunger and that thirst for it? Because, like, obviously, like, this is now generations that have passed. Like, you mentioned, like, you were very young when it happened. Like, for me, obviously, my generation, I was born decades afterwards. It doesn't resonate with me as, like, 9/11 resonates with me, because that was, like, a very, like, a flashpoint moment for me in my life and stuff. But, like, do you think that will ultimately, because if there's the podcast and there's still content about it, and, like, you Google JFK assassination, there's a ton of different things right now about it because it's now the 60th anniversary that, hey, like, maybe this will ultimately be uncovered about what actually happened on that day in November 22nd, 1963.
Well, we have voices that are still singing loud, whether it's Oliver Stone, whether it's Rob Reiner now. We got people that want to get to the bottom of it. And I think more than anything, the scar that lays on our nation's history, Vietnam, it really starts with the assassination of JFK, who gave a speech at American University about freedom, about peace, that disrupted the war machine in our government, and that created a lot of issues. Now we've got two more movies coming out, right? We've got a movie that David Mamet, I think the guy who wrote Glengarry Glen Ross, he's doing it from the crime element, from the mafia point of view. And then there's another one coming out. So I think it's staying in the mainstream. Look, one thing we know about our country's viewing history, we love murder mysteries.
Yeah,
everybody's Angela Lansbury on Murder, She Wrote. Hell, I got a typewriter behind me that's from Murder, She Wrote. So, like, we love that. The problem we don't have is we don't have a judge here. Like, it's a fact. And Matt Crumpton says this on Solving JFK. And he's a lawyer. He said there's no way they could have convicted Lee Harvey Oswald in any court of law. There's no way. And Posner's up there patting himself on the back with, I don't know how he gets his suits tailored, his arms so long, patting himself on the goddamn back, saying he had the case done. The thing I think people misconstrue is we had an element of our government that we were in the CIA called, and it was called Mockingbird. And so Mockingbird was a covert operation to where we would hire newspaper people in different countries to spin stories so we could overthrow the government, so that we could get the version of the narrative that we wanted out. And they were on the payroll. And it's a fact. I mean, you can look it up in the National Archives. So that Mockingbird operation is the same one they used on us in this case. So it's nothing new, And so today, 60 years, we have to sit here and people tell us that, we have, that he acted alone, when people on the ground at the site swear that the bullets came from over by the grassy knoll. And there's no judge to say this is right or wrong, because only Garrison's the one who's brought it to trial.
Last question for me on this is, what annoys you more? People who say Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in the JFK assassination, or people who say that Bruce Springsteen is a one-hit wonder? What grinds your gears more?
Both do, but Bruce Springsteen's an acquired taste, right? That's an acquired taste. And I can't judge anybody who doesn't like my taste. That's not fair.
Uh-huh.
The facts are really simple. Oswald did not act alone. In fact, there's ballistics tests. He didn't even fire a gun that day. They have that. We know Paul Landis just came out with he found the magic bullet, right? That's what he's claiming. So to me, I get really angry with the people that claim that Oswald did it himself, because there's facts to disprove it. And you're just not willing to look at the facts. You're not willing to kind of take into account that Jack Ruby was in Dealey Plaza that day. Why did Jack Ruby kill Oswald? If you just ask yourself that question, why did he do it? Oh, because he loved America, because he didn't want Mrs. Kennedy to suffer. Can we stop that nonsense, please? People say, well, he left his dogs in the car, and why would he do that? He loved his dogs. His car was packed like a suicide. He basically wanted someone to take care of his life, because he knew what he was going to go do. Because Tippit didn't kill Oswald. That was the issue. But anyway, that I would say that it's the facts. But we got to get on to football.
Let's get on the football. Thanksgiving is this weekend. Once again, happy Thanksgiving to everybody who's listening. We're thankful for all of you guys who subscribe, rate, and review, and follow along with the podcast. And we got a couple minutes left in this segment. We'll carry the conversation on to the next one. But Monday Night Football was a fantastic game. Like, I enjoyed watching it. Great defense, timely offensive plays, mistakes, unfortunately, for the Kansas City Chiefs. But the Eagles, once again, eke out a win 21-17 in the Super Bowl rematch here. And for Philly, it's kind of the same song of after the game, Jalen Hurts said, we didn't play our A game, but we still won. That's a good sign. And then for Kansas City, a lot of the conversation is, do they have enough in the pass-catching department to repeat as Super Bowl champions? Kind of your thoughts here from what we saw Monday Night Football.
Well, I mean, look, the Chiefs haven't scored in the second half in 3 games.
3 straight
Think
games,
about that.
Yeah.
3 straight games haven't scored in the second half. Now, they've dropped – I mean, Big Daddy told me yesterday, I thought it was 3. He claims it's 5. He was so happy when Scantling dropped the pass. He was celebrating. You thought he won, because he hated him when he was with the Packers, and they had to play him. And see, that proves that he's right in his evaluation that he dropped that pass.
All comes back to Goody.
I think there's a couple things going on with the Chiefs. I think 2 teams are very similar, Miami and the Chiefs, that the perception is they're being run by their offense. And they may have moments that their offense is really elite, but they're truly defensive teams. They're truly and the Chiefs are a defensive team. And Andy Reid knows it. And then when Andy Reid went for it and was conservative at the end of that game when he punted, I think he was trying to win the game with his defense. I think there's no question, because his offense has no explosiveness. The longest pass play was 17 yards. If you were to tell somebody that Andy Reid's going to go into a game and run the ball as much as he ran the ball against a good run defense, right? What we know, Bieniemy's sitting there saying, Andy would have been proud of me. I called 55 straight passes. He called 30 straight passes. He called 30 runs in this game. Mahomes had 43 attempts for 177 yards. So there's fundamentally, they're not explosive on offense. They're going to have to play a different way. And I think that's what we saw on Monday night.
Yeah, they were kind of dinking and dunking it on Monday Night Football just because, like you mentioned, they can't really make those explosive plays. And a lot of defenses now say, hey, we're going to key in on Travis Kelce. We're going to bracket him and make these other guys beat you. And it's Marquez Valdes-Scantling. It's Sky Moore. It's like guys who you don't fear driving to the stadium, as we like to say here on the GM Shuffle podcast. Those are guys that kind of just Jags. We'll continue to talk about this game and see the whole landscape on the other side.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
It's interesting because obviously Kansas City's offense is not the explosive offense that we'd grown accustomed to since Mahomes took over in 2018. But I think there's also a version of the game to where if Travis Kelce doesn't fumble the football, maybe they get some points there, at least a field goal. And obviously Marquez Valdes-Scantling, which, yes, he has a propensity to drop footballs. Like, that's why Big Daddy was glad to see him go in Green Bay. But, like, if he just catches that pass, like, maybe this is Kansas City wins the game by a field goal instead of losing this game. Like, do you chalk up any of this to bad luck here, or is there, like, actual systemic problems with the Kansas City offense?
I think because their offense isn't explosive, and it's not what we're used to, their margin for error is slighter. If Mahomes doesn't throw the interception in the red zone, they're 2 for 3 in the red zone, and they're basically 2 for 4 in the red zone. And two of the times they don't score turnovers. They have 2 red zone turnovers, right? And so they win that game, and all it's telling us is their margin for error is slimmer. They can't overcome the mistakes where in the past they could, and we would look past them, but they can't do that any longer. They have to play perfectly. They've got to protect the football. They've got to win special teams. They've got to play a 3-dimensional game. And I think Andy sees that. I know Andy knows that, his receivers are not reliable. They don't catch the ball. And, it's going to be a challenge. Now, when they go against a bad team or a team that, can't really match up to them up front, that, we'll be having the pod, oh, the Chiefs are back. Are they back? No, timeout. They're not. It's like Miami. We think of Miami as this unbelievable offense, which they were earlier in the season. But in the last 4 games, Femi, they've turned it over 7 times. They averaged 20 points a game. They've only averaged 84.75 yards rushing. In the prior games, not counting the Bronco game, which you got to throw that game out, right? They averaged 148. So, but where they're really becoming much better is defensively, right? Defensively, you can't run the ball on them, right? Hard to run the ball. They're creating turnovers with their defense. So it's you've got to adjust your team to what's happening. And I think Andy is doing that. I think he is doing that. He cannot go in there and just say, Pat, win the game. They got to play complementary football. And I think he's going to do that. And Philly, for whatever reason, I mean, Philly, their passing game was non-existent there. I mean, they made the big play, the 41-yarder to Smith, but what their run game isn't as explosive. I mean, Hurts, how many quarterback draws are they going to call? I mean, the guy had 12 carries for 29 yards, and he sacked 5 times. Now, I know a lot of those quarterback draws are check with me's at the line. You can see Kelsey when he changed the direction of the run. You can see that based on front and looks and all that. So, but I don't see Philly. Like, my question to you is, after that game, when I got done watching it and Big Daddy celebrated around the kitchen for the Valdez-Scantling drop, who is the best team in the NFL? And I say this respectfully because I think it's going to make an incredible playoff series. I don't think there is one. I don't think there is one is my answer. And I'm so happy to see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to make the final 6 weeks of the season that much more interesting, and obviously the playoffs, as you mentioned, because this sort of goes back to the Bill Parcells saying of, hey, you start to figure out who you are around Thanksgiving. Well, Thanksgiving is tomorrow. And we still don't really know who that team is. Like, Philly has the record at 9-1. They have the best record, but it doesn't look like it looked last year when it was like, oh, this is a dominant football team. Their fastball, nobody can hit it, and it's going to have to take a great performance to beat them. And it's not like we don't have that situation this year. And on the AFC side, Kansas City has problems. We see Miami offensively. They haven't been that explosive team there. Buffalo, I mean, they've been turning the ball over left and right. And I guess last week they figured some stuff out, but that was also against the New York Jets. Baltimore maybe, but now they're banged up with Mark Andrews. Like, I'm with you. Like, I think in the NFC, if you pinned me down, I think I'd still lean towards San Francisco in the NFC as the best team in that conference. But it all remains to be seen the rest of the way here. Like, the 6 weeks will tell us the story.
No question. I mean, let's take Philly, for example. Look, Philly has this ability to win the game. And we judge Philly's performances like we're in the Olympics, and there's the Russian judge, there's the Polish judge,
Style
there's the
points.
Italian judge, throw out, like they find ways to win the game. But where they're different this year, and Hurts isn't quite the same player he was in terms of throwing the football. But where they're not the same team this year is last year they had 204 points in the second quarter alone. 204 in the second quarter alone. And so now, this year they've scored 68 points in the second quarter. Like, they're just not jumping on top of people early in the game and dominating. Now, that doesn't mean they can't win. That doesn't mean they can't win. They've made plays. They have a great ability to find a way to win the game. So you got to give them credit for that. But that means they're vulnerable. They could have an off day. I mean, look, Dallas is first and 5 at the 6. Can't get it in the end zone. Kansas City drops a pass, turns it over twice. I mean, their margin is what we talked about with Kansas City earlier, right? They have a slim margin, but they're making the plays to win, and they're hiding some of their sins by doing so.
Yeah, and like Hurts wasn't great Monday night. I mean, 14-22, 150, and an interception. Probably one of the worst games he's played this season, but they made the big pass to Devontae Smith, and they get in and take the lead there to where they are making the plays, and their opponents, who are in that same weight class, are not making those plays. And I think one team that we can cross off, Michael, from this contending list is a team that we thought was going to start to join that conversation. That's the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, Joe Burrow. We didn't mention it on Monday. Obviously, we got caught up with all of the games from Sunday reacting to that stuff, but obviously last Thursday, Burrow messes with his wrist, the torn ligament in the right wrist there to where he's done for the season. And that puts them in a blow into where you look at the AFC landscape. If Burrow's not going to be in the playoffs and they kind of cross Cincinnati off, the Bills, while yes, last week was good, they have an incredibly difficult schedule coming up there. 4 of these next 6 games on the road playing really good teams. If they can't get in, then is it just Lamar and Mahomes as the quarterbacks that you really trust in the AFC conversation? Like, this Burrow injury is big for the AFC landscape and the landscape of the NFL as a whole.
No question. And to me, like Zach Taylor, I was talking to somebody today in the league about this. Like, to me, Zach Taylor puts all his chips in the Burrow basket, right? Because there's no run game in Cincinnati. There's no balance to what Cincinnati does offensively. They're 32nd in rushing attempts. This is before they lost Burrow. They're 30th in yards, they're 26 in touchdown runs, and they're 26 in yards per attempt. They have no diversity in their portfolio. Everything falls on the shoulders of Burrow. Okay? And he's great. And he's great. But the problem is when you don't have a three-dimensional team like Andy Reid does, right? You could say Andy Reid's a West Coast offense guy all you want, but the son of a bitch is a tough coach. Their teams are tough, and if he wants it, like he did the other night, 30 runs, he can run it. He's different than all these other West Coast guys who preach about, well, we're going to throw the ball. No, Andy could if he wanted to. He just knows that you got to throw to score. Whereas Cincinnati's so one-dimensional, so now you're replacing a great player with Browning. Like, how can you run the same offense? You say you can't. You can't do it. You got to change, right? Well, you're not conditioned to change. You have your offensive linemen this time of the season are their pad levels not down. They're going to play too high. They're used to run block, and they're not equipped to come out and run the ball. They might get a run here or a run there. I mean, but you think they're going to run the ball on Pittsburgh and block that front? I mean, Pittsburgh's going to dare the kid to throw the ball to beat him. He's going to say, okay, you want to get to 11? Good. You go to 11. We'll just we'll play base defense against your 11 and make him throw it 35 times. How's that going to work out for you?
Not good. At least I don't think it's going to go well for Jake Brown.
So to me, it's really about, this is the problem with the league. There's not enough thought to how to set up your team in case something happens, right? You've got to be able to play the game. Great teams can play the game anyway. Like if you only can play one style, eventually that style, it's like baseball pitchers. If you only have a fastball, you can't go 9 innings. So as a head coach, you're sitting there, you have to develop your team to figure out who do we have to beat in November and December, and what kind of team do we need to have at that point. And that's where I think we're missing it. Buffalo, that's where they miss it. Cincinnati misses it. I mean, Andy Reid does it. I mean, the other night was a perfect example because, as you said, well, I mean, if they don't turn it over twice in the red area and catch a pass, that game plan worked.
Which kind of leads me to what Tom Brady said earlier this week. He was with Stephen A. Smith on his show and was talking about the level of play in the NFL and said that there's mediocrity right now across the league. He quote, does not see the excellence that he saw in the past. This was the full quote. I think there's a lot of mediocrity in today's NFL. I don't see the excellence that I saw in the past. I think the coaching isn't as good as it was. I don't think the development of young players is as good as it was. The rules have allowed a lot of bad habits to get into the actual performance of the game. And he talked about kind of like the rules are trying to protect players versus when he was playing, he would try to protect his own teammate by saying, hey, if Ray Lewis is sitting there in the middle of the defense, I'm not going to throw over the middle of the field for my receiver to get knocked out. Like it's a little bit of a lot of things going on right now as to why we're seeing a little bit of a product that's not as great as what we saw in the past, according to Tom Brady.
Yeah, I think this too. I think the rules too, not the rules of the game, the rules of the offseason have changed this, right? We're sitting here and Bill Berman sent me a message. The Wall Street Journal had a column out that there's over $1 billion of quarterbacks not playing in the NFL. And so how is this possible, right? We've made all the rules so you can't hit the quarterback. When Johnny U played, nobody was protecting his ass, right? When Dan Fouts played, nobody was protecting his. Even when Joe Montana was playing, nobody protected his ass. So, we're protecting him more than we ever have, and yet we're getting injuries. Why? Why would that be? Well, the reason is really simple: player development. We've taken away the ability for the offensive and defensive line coaches to spend time in the offseason developing the players, particularly the offensive linemen. Offensive linemen need this work year-round. They need to be in there. They need to lift weights. They need to work on their fundamentals and techniques. It's a 12-month job to be a good lineman. And because we've taken that away, we've got a bunch of shitty linemen out there, an abundance of bad linemen. And that affects the game, but nobody will see it from that. They're looking for the one cure. Well, let's just protect the quarterback. It goes back to the great story about the bank in Paramount, California, right? That got robbed continuously, was on the FBI's top 100 list, top 10 list of banks that were robbed, right? And what do they try to do? They do exactly what the NFL does. We're going to put more security guards in there. We're going to put plexiglass. We're going to put cameras. We're going to do all that crap, right? Still the top 10. One day, an intern comes in and says, why don't we just park a broken down police car, clean it up, put it in front of the bank? You know what happened? Never got robbed again, okay? Because that solved the problem. They keep looking for false solutions. The solutions to help the quarterback lie in the player development of offensive linemen.
Yeah, and if you poll any fan base, I think most fan bases would say we don't have a good offensive line, and that's spread out throughout the year. And like a lot of the times where it's like the O linemen, the starters are pretty solid, but once you get those injuries, the drop off from starting O lineman to backup O lineman is like the size of the Grand Canyon. The delta is massive there, and unfortunately we have a lot of QB injuries. We'll talk more about this on the other side, and also some coaching changes as well on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Michael, you mentioned that the billions of dollars of quarterbacks that we have sitting on IR right now. This is the list of season-ending injuries. Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, and Aaron Rodgers, which kind of kicked everything off week 1 on Monday Night Football. Like, it's been a mash unit for these quarterbacks, and unfortunately, this is, like, when you get these quarterbacks hurt, the level of play drops, and I'm sure the league will try to put another Band-Aid on this offseason. Maybe we won't be able to hit quarterbacks. Maybe it's two-hand touch the rest of the way for these quarterbacks.
They'll still get hurt.
And they probably
will.
Still
get hurt. I mean, we're seeing proof of that right now. I mean, until we decide to allow the two things have to happen. We got to get coaches that are willing to protect the quarterback in a better fashion. I mean, I've said this numerous times. If I was Sam Howell's father, I'd be screaming at Eric Bieniemy because they're not helping him at all. I mean, getting him killed. I mean, seriously, how that kid isn't hurt, I have no idea. The amount of hits he's taken, forget the sacks, right? But the worst thing that's happened to pro football is the Madden game. The Madden game has transformed itself into the NFL because everybody calling plays on Sunday is like the Madden game. You know, Sean Payton, it's funny. Somebody sent me this and it's so true. Sean Payton, I listen to all this stuff out there. You know, he's too conservative. He's settling for field goals. So on this win streak, he's only gone for it on 4th down 4 times. He's 2 for 4. He's kicked 14 field goals and he's winning games because he's taking the points. He's not trying to do something out of the ordinary. He's keeping his quarterback healthy. He's managing the game. But now we're into this, we got to get stats. You know, Washington, oh, man, they could throw the ball. Look at their stats. I heard somebody say the other day, man, Bieniemy's proven he's a head coach. Look at him throwing the ball. They can't win a game. They turn it over 6 times. How's that proving anything? You know, it's like the other day I heard somebody say, well, Justin Fields, one of our dear friends said, Justin Fields fumbled, but he played great. No, he fumbled like he always does. That's not playing great. Did he look good in the game? I thought, as I said on Monday, I thought it was the best he's been. But we're not having enough people to defend the quarterback. Keeping the quarterback upright is the job of the offensive coordinator. You got to make sure he's protected. And you could ask Brady. Don't ask me. Brady would say that. Like, look, I'm not protected. When you throw 3-step drops, the quarterback should not get hit. He's not going to get hit. Right? You cannot. You got to throw 3-step, get the ball out. It shouldn't never take. It's not the lineman if you get sacked. Like, there's got to be better coaching of protecting the quarterback. And I think Brady was talking about that. So it's player development. It's offensive technology of coaching. It's not always we're going to just throw it up the field and see what we do and get our quarterback killed.
Yeah. It's managing and calling the game for your team, not just like what the consensus opinion says.
On the specific day of the game.
Yes, 100%. That's what Sean Payton is doing, and that's what Andy Reid is doing, as you outlined earlier in this pod. Like, hey, like he knows we can't be the pass happy team. We got to run the ball 30 times against Philadelphia and try to go ahead and go about it that way. Just unfortunately, they had a couple drops and some fumbles, and there you go. You lose the game. Let's get into the Thanksgiving Day slate, though. Thanksgiving, my favorite holiday, Michael. I don't know about you. We get 3 games, which is absolutely phenomenal. We get food. We get the bourbon. We get the friends and family. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. And it starts bright and early in the morning for us here on the West Coast. Green Bay at Detroit. The Lions, 7.5-point favorites. Total 47 in this game here. Is this a coronation on national TV for the Lions, or can Big Daddy's Packers keep this game close?
Oh, can you imagine how good it's going to be on Thanksgiving Day? Before you even take a bite, I'm going to listen to him bitch for 3 fucking hours straight. And they go through every single draft pick.
You get that bourbon going, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, go in between smokes. I mean, somebody told me the other day you should video stream this and sell tickets, and I think it would be I'd make a fortune off it. It'd be so good. Look, I think the one thing that's been pretty clear is the home to the favorites in these games usually win, with the exception of Dallas.
Yeah.
I mean, Dallas has lost 4 straight ATS games on Thanksgiving. They're 1-11 on the past 12 Thanksgiving games. I mean, they haven't done well according to BetLab. So favorites on Thanksgiving are usually very profitable. They're usually very profitable. So when you look at it, you say, okay, this is a great opportunity to play Detroit, because the favorites typically win here. And Detroit didn't play their best game, still won the game by 5, even though the Bears were +3 in the turnover takeaway. It's the first 4 turnover game that they had. I mean, they had 3 turnovers against Seattle and lost. And the last time Goff threw 3 interceptions was back in 2019 when he played with the Rams against the Bucs. So I got a feeling they're going to be able to throw the football. The Packers are a confusing team defensively because, the last time they played the Lions, they gave up 211 yards on the ground, right? And they give up, certain teams can run the ball on them and certain teams can't. And when Detroit can run the ball like that, they're going to be hard to play. I like Detroit. I think Detroit bounces back. When they lost to Seattle, they came back. They beat Atlanta 20-6. I think Detroit will move the football. I think it's going to be a long day for Big Daddy.
Yeah, that's how I see it too. I think they kind of bounce back in Detroit, especially in the national TV window as well. Like this has always been like Detroit's one national game. They usually get beat by Green Bay or by somebody. The tables have turned. I think Detroit's going to be able to show up and show out in this game here. How about my Dallas Cowboys, who you mentioned have been bad against the number on Thanksgiving? They won last year against the Giants. The Giants kind of snuck in that back door there, but the Cowboys now 12-point favorites against the Washington Commanders. There, that's a big number, man.
I mean, but see, here's where I think you got to give the Cowboys some credit, McCarthy, and nobody wants to give him any credit at all. Cowboys play 32-31 of offense. They play 27-30 of defense. They get the lead at the half. They've scored 19.4 points in the first half. They've allowed 8.8. Okay, so they play from in front. Now, they've lost some close games to good teams. I get that, right? But they've been able to control the pace of the game, and they stop the opponent from running the football. Right, the last 2 weeks, they've only allowed 138 yards passing. Of course, they played DeVito and poor Bryce Young. So, they've been very good defensively, and they play from in front. And I think Washington is good with the division. We know that Rivera is able to play cover against this, but they're going to have to protect their quarterback. Like, how does Washington block this team? And Washington's not going to create turnovers. I mean, that's something they just haven't been able to do. and so to me, this Cowboy team is interesting, Femi, is because they are the Eagle team of last year in the second quarter. They average 11.3 points in the second quarter this year. They've scored 113 in 10 games, and Washington allows 9.4 in that quarter. I think if they play from in front, it could get bad, but I think Washington does keep it close like they always do.
Yeah, I mean, Washington, their pass game, like you said, it gets Howell killed, but when he does have time, he's able to find those receivers there. McLaurin's really good, and this could be another one where the absence of Trayvon Diggs is felt, but Deron Bland's been awesome. I mean, the guy has 6 interceptions, 4 of them for touchdowns. Like, how they've been able to get him going, and he was good last year as well, but he's even taken it up another level in replacement of Trayvon Diggs, who's on the IR. The last Thursday night game, Thanksgiving game, I should say, Niners at the Seahawks. San Francisco a 7-point favorite. Sounds like Geno Smith will play for Seattle. Pete Carroll, he was limited in practice earlier this week. Sounds like he should be good to go. The total's at 44. Yeah,
I mean, why is C.J. Stroud being talked about as the MVP and Brock Purdy isn't? I mean, seriously, why isn't he? I mean, last year Brock Purdy was good, but he's really good this year. I mean, he's really good this year, and he's accurate as hell with the football. Why do we stigmatize players because of where they get drafted? Right? Like, why is that? Like, why can't we just watch this guy play and just say, he's really good? Like, he's really good. Why do we constantly have to sit there and think, he threw 2 interceptions here? I mean, his first half, he's 18-2 in touchdowns and interceptions. In the first half, he's 73% completion. He's thrown 9 touchdowns, no interceptions, 7.6 yards per attempt. And they get the lead. And they start fast. I mean, they are really good with them. And when they run the football, they're even more effective. And when he's throwing the ball as accurately as he could, this is such a good team. But they've held the ball. They're like Dallas. They've held the ball for 31-26. Their defense is only on the field 28-34. And if Seattle keeps it close, it'll be because they've executed on third down. That's where the game is. And you can execute on the 49ers on third down if you block them. They're 23rd in the league in third down defense. So I just think, to me, like we've talked about, these are the kind of games where you want to take Seattle and the points. But I think Purdy's really good. And I think Seattle's going to have a hard time blocking the front. Look, Washington made it a 3-point game when they were up there, and they only lost by 3.
And the numbers back it up on Brock Purdy. QBR, he leads by a mile, not like by a significant margin there. He's 77 in his QBR, tops in the league. EPA per play, he has a pretty wide margin as well on that. So, the numbers show that Brock Purdy should be in the MVP conversation, which, if they continue to win, I think eventually he'll get there. But right now, it seems like there's a little bit of an apprehension to put him in that conversation. We do get a Black Friday game, Michael, for the first time in league history. Black Friday. We get Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Monday. This is exactly what we want. The Jets are hosting the Miami Dolphins right now. Miami, a 9.5-point favorite, 10 over at DraftKings, total 41. Zach Wilson has been benched. It is now Tim Boyle at quarterback for Gang Green.
How bad must you be if Tim Boyle is going to be the starter? Tim Boyle averaged 48.4% completions at UConn in the games he played, right? I don't want to disparage the guy. The guy's in the league because he got signed by Green Bay when Aaron Rodgers was on Green Bay's team. He got cut. He kind of bounced around, and he came back to Green Bay. He's Nathaniel Hackett's offense. But, how does he evoke any confidence in what you're going to be able to do? I think Zach Wilson, I don't think he loves football. I think it's clear, you can't go down that road. They've turned the ball over 10 times in the last 4 games. It's hard, but this offensive line, how are they going to block this Miami front? But you go to Tim Boyle, is that going to really help things out? Is that going to matter? I don't see it. Femi, I don't know how you start Tim Boyle. 48.6% completion percentage at UConn. He's bounced around the league. He knows what to do, but can he actually do it? The one thing about the Jets, and I think you see this in their offense, the reason they don't run the ball is because they can't convert third downs. They can't stay on the field. They're 22% on third down. They can't convert third and short. They can't convert anything. And so even when they get into a 3rd and 2, which everybody says is manageable, they can't manage it. I think this opens up a huge can of worms. As bad as Zach Wilson is, Tim Boyle can't be very good, especially against this Miami defense, which we come back from the break, I want to talk about, because Miami, like Kansas City, is a really good defensive team.
Yeah, this number was sitting at 8, then the news came out that Boyle was going to start. Betting market very skeptical of Tim Boyle. Goes from 8 to then 10, now sitting around 9.5, 10, depending on where you shop. We'll wrap up the pod on the other side.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
So the betting market is skeptical of Tim Boyle going up against this Miami Dolphins defense, but would you lay that big number, though, with Miami on the road, Black Friday, kind of a weird situation travel-wise, but it's also Tim Boyle on the other side.
Yeah. So here's how I looked at this game. I looked at the Raider game last week. I thought, okay, the Raiders will score between 10 and 13 points against a good Miami defense. I was counting on Miami scoring 30, okay? I thought Miami would score 30 on the Raiders, and they couldn't do it. Miami has averaged 20.5 points per game over the last 4 games. They have not been the same team. They can't run the football as effectively or as explosively as they had earlier in the year. And then when you peel back Tua, who's got more concern to be the MVP than Brock Purdy, but when you peel back Tua's numbers on third down, everybody thinks Miami's this an elite team offensively and they can do whatever they want. Well, it's a little bit of a misconception because they're so good at making those explosive plays. Tyreek Hill has 39% of the Miami Dolphins first downs passing. 39%. Think about that. And they're so good. But Miami on third down only converts an average of 4 third downs a game. So if you get them up to 15 or 16 third downs, which is hard to do, They're not going to convert very many of those. I mean, they're not a good third down team. Now, and then when you get him on third down, Tua's numbers go dramatically down. He's a 60% completion player on third down. He averages 7.4 yards per attempt on third down. He's only run for 1 first down. He's thrown 8 interceptions, and he's had 8 touchdowns. He's thrown 5 interceptions. So when it gets to a third down game, which people have tried to make it because they've stopped this explosive run. Remember, I said earlier in the pod, they average 84.7 yards running the ball the last 4 games. First 5 throw the Bronco out 148. So they're not explosively scoring like the Chiefs. Even though they have explosive players, they're not able to do that. So that's where, can they score 30 on the Jets? Yeah, I think they could. And Boyle probably could give them 7. Last week, O'Connell threw 3 interceptions, but none of them went back for a touchdown. I mean, the interception of Phillips was getting ready to go for a touchdown to cover, but he got tripped up and tackled by O'Connell. So I think that's the only question I have. I mean, think about this. The Jets have scored 18 points in the first quarter, Femi. That's 1.8 per game. They're going to play from behind. And when you're playing from behind against the Vic Fangio defense, that means you're in a lot of third downs, which the Jets can't convert. You can't stay ahead of the chains. You're playing from behind, and that shitty offensive line is going to get exposed. So, I mean, to me, I think it's too much of a number. I get why it moved away from Boyle, even though it was really a total thing about Boyle than it was about Zach Wilson.
And this is a Jets offense that has, I believe, 9 offensive touchdowns so far this season, and we're at Thanksgiving. Like that's that's inexcusable. So I guess something had to change. We'll see if that changes for the better. Speaking of change, Michael, in the AFC North, the Steelers taking on the Bengals. Obviously, we noted it'll be Jake Browning for Cincinnati starting, but the Steelers made the decision that fans have been clamoring for dating back to last season, probably. They fired offensive coordinator Matt Canada. It will now be Mike Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner, who are taking over as the interim play callers, kind of just taking on that decision, the both of them as well. But do you expect to see a different Steelers offense here, or is the problem at quarterback with Kenny Pickett and some other issues?
Well, they say Sullivan and Pickett are very close. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Look, they can't run different plays. I mean, the Raiders fired McDaniel. They're running the same plays, right? Sometimes they're more effective against certain teams. I think Pittsburgh is limited by what they are offensively and the scheme and how they set it up. They're 28th in points scored. They're 28th in yards. They're 31st. They can't make plays in the passing game. I mean, they're 25th in EPA per play. So they haven't had more than 22 first downs in a game, and they only did that once. They're 30th overall in first down. So I think what Mike Tomlin decided, Femi, was, hey, look, we've given this as much as we can. We've tried. I think he backed Matt Canada. Matt Canada, great guy, all that. But he's tried everything in his power to give Canada a chance to do his job effectively. And at the end of the day, they can't score touchdowns. I do think there will be a lift, but the more Pickett gets involved, will he protect the ball? They got to play a certain way. They're limited by their offensive line and by his ability to throw the ball. I think it may be a little bit of a rush, but I can't imagine it's going to be. I mean, I'm sure there'll be some more trick plays. I'm sure they'll do different things, and I'm sure these 2 new guys will want to. They like stuff that Canada didn't like, and it'll look a little different. But I do think that they're going to have to kind of bring somebody in Pittsburgh to kind of revamp this whole offense, because right now they're behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, Mike Tomlin said we're in the business of trying to score touchdowns, and they hadn't been doing that. They're losing last week 13-10 to the Cleveland Browns. How about the AFC South showdown? This is going to determine first place heading into the final month of the regular season. Jacksonville at Houston. The Jaguars right now 1.5-point favorites, total 48.5. Here's another showcase game for C.J. Stroud, the runaway offensive rookie of the year, against this Jacksonville Jaguars team, who they beat badly in Duval County about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, look, and we know this about Lawrence, right? He's better on the road than he is at home. I mean, he's better on the road than he is at home. And so, this is one of those where, look, they got to win this. They can't come away without a win. And the San Francisco game was somewhat humiliating. They got back on track, but it was Will Levis, right? I mean, Will Levis wasn't very good. He hasn't been very good. When you watch Tennessee play, you have to throw away Levis's numbers because they were mostly in the fourth quarter. This will be the best defense I think Houston's seen since they played them in week 1 when Houston put, they threw for 280 yards against them. This is very good on red zone defense. They're very good on third down. Houston's going to have to, CJ's going to have to make plays. But last week, they turned the ball over so often in the red zone. That game would have not been as close as it was had they not done that. Stroud's playing really good. I have a feeling that they're going to play a lot better. They have to. And Lawrence has got to play better. I mean, Lawrence, as I went through last week, has not had those kind of games that we think he would have. He's had 29 games in his career under 7 yards per attempt. And a lot of them are with Peterson. This perception that he's better with Peterson, it's pretty much been the same if you peel back and look at the numbers. I think this will be a fun game. Houston at home is a good team.
Yeah, and that'll be a raucous environment, I'm sure, with everything that's at stake. Houston has a chance to sweep Jacksonville and have the season tiebreaker, which could come down to who ultimately wins the division there. Staying in the division, this is kind of a sneaky game when you look at the wild cards for both the AFC and the NFC. Tampa and Indianapolis. Colts right now 2.5-point favorites, total 44. The big news with Indy, though, this week was releasing former All-Pro linebacker Shaquille Leonard there, which obviously he hasn't been quite the same guy since the injury, which is unfortunate because he was looking like one of the best linebackers in the league.
Yeah, but I mean, when people act surprised that he got cut, it's like, are you watching the tape? I mean, the Patriots could have lined up and run inside zone right at him, and he's just not the same player. He's got name appeal and he's got this huge contract, and good for him, it's all guaranteed. But he's not the same player. That did not surprise. They needed to get him away because, like a lot of great players, they want to keep playing, right? They don't see that they're not playing well. And so when you demote them, it becomes very toxic within your locker room. So they had to do this. They had to make this move. Look, they're not a great defense to begin with, and he wasn't really helping them. This will be an interesting game because the Bucs, I think if you watch the San Francisco game, the Bucs moved the ball pretty effectively against San Francisco. Baker threw it better than I thought he was going to throw it. And, they had some burps in the red zone. They kind of didn't finish drives. I thought if you took San Francisco, you're lucky to kind of cover that game when you really study it and peel it back. I just think, to me, I don't know why the Colts are favored. They're going to have a hard time running the ball on the Bucs. The Bucs get in that bare front and they take away that outside zone run, which is what they want to do. The Patriots did the same thing. I mean, the Patriots win that game last week, 2 weeks ago over in Germany. I mean, what do you think this line should be? It should be a pick 'em. If you're getting 2.5 in the Bucs, I think you got to take it.
Yeah, I think if you get 3 as well, that's the ultimate one right there, where you just bet Tampa Bay.
But it won't go to 3.
Yeah,
it just tells you how much they really want you to take. The Bucs are the play here.
Yeah, you
got to take the Bucs here because they're not going to 3. They don't want to give you the 3.
Probably Bucs or pass. You're right on that regard. Let's get to the afternoon slate on Sunday. The big game is in Philadelphia. Bills at the Eagles. Right now, that line is down to 3.5 at DraftKings, but it looks like it wants to go to 3. Total 48.5. Yeah, it's 3 pretty much for most places.
When I went over my notes this morning, it was 3 everywhere. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we have it at DraftKings at 3.5 still, and if you can get that, I mean, look, I don't like the matchup for Buffalo at all because Buffalo, I know you can lure yourself to thinking that, Philly, you can throw on Philly. But if you take away Diggs, where's Buffalo going with the ball, right? And, can Buffalo play toe-to-toe with Philly? I think that's the fundamental question. Can Buffalo stop the run game of Philadelphia? I think that's going to be the key. I mean, Philly, for all their talk about A.J. Brown, and he's great, don't get me wrong, they want to run the ball. I mean, the last 2 weeks against Dallas and against the Chiefs, they won both games. They threw for 183 against Dallas. They threw for 180. They threw for 124 against the Chiefs and won both games. When they beat the Jets and they lost to the Jets and they beat Miami and they beat Washington, I mean, they turned the ball over 8 times in those 3 games. And they didn't run for 100 yards in either of those games. Philly wants to run the football. They want to run it. They're 3rd in rushing attempts. They're only 21st in yards per attempt. They want to run the football. That's what they want to do. That's where they really kind of sets everything else up. And when they don't have that, that's when they struggle. That's why they scored. They struggled to score a lot of points against Dallas. They moved it. They got to run the ball, and I think you can run the ball in Buffalo. I really do.
Yeah, I think a lot of the sharps took the 3.5 because they see this as a quote-unquote bad spot for Philadelphia coming off of the big win Monday night in that Super Bowl rematch. But I agree with you from terms of the X's and O's. I would favor Philadelphia on the X's and O's side of thing. Here, we got a minute left. 2 rapid-fire quick ones. First question, Who's starting at quarterback for the New England Patriots, and does it matter as they take on the New York Giants?
I think the problem with New England is Zappe can't, as bad as Mac Jones is, I'm not sure Zappe can beat him out. I mean, my guess it has to stay Mac because, Zappe it depends on how they practice. What's today? Today is Wednesday.
Yep.
I think it'll depend on how they practice Wednesday and Thursday. If Zappe has a good day in practice, I think they want Zappe to be the starter, but he's got to earn it. They're just not going to give you the job, right? And so that I think is the case.
Yeah, Mac Jones just said to the media, if he's starting, said, quote, hope so. That's the plan, I think. Last one. Is this Brandon Staley's last stand on Sunday Night Football against the Ravens?
No, I mean, he's playing great defense. He's playing. You need to know that he's playing.
I'm confident.
Great defense.
I'm confident in that, Michael. I'm confident in that.
I mean, he's playing great defense. I mean, I'm sure Lamar sees it that way too. I can't wait. I can't wait. That line opened at 4. It's down to 3.5.
Someone likes him.
We're betting them.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Safe travels wherever you're headed. We'll be back on Monday to react to all of it.